Well, I usually do videos on religious subjects. I have not been very successful as far as numbers go. And a friend of mine said I should do more marketing, which is not my thing really. But I wanted to talk about something with a catchy title, which would be Harvard Law School, so that if people Google this or look this up in YouTube, they may be interested and at least they'll get some views. And I'm trying to see if I can fire up my channel, which, like I said, is mostly on biblical and religious subjects. But I did attend Harvard Law School. I was admitted in 1978. I had been on the waiting list. I graduated in 81. I came from Florida State University. And the way I got into Harvard is interesting. I was on the waiting list. So I was on the waiting list, and I was also voted most improved student when I graduated, which I've always said is a prize no one sets out to get. And the reason I was voted most improved student is probably due to the fact that halfway through the 3 years of law school, I was so miserable studying law that I decided to completely disregard employment prospects with law firms and law jobs. And as long as I was there to graduate the least, painfully possible, and therefore I took courses like, American Indian law, Roman law, English legal history, law and medieval society. Last year you could cross-register at some other school, and I cross-registered at the Divinity School for Gospel of John with Dieter Georgi, a very famous New Testament scholar, Bultmann student. If you know anything about biblical studies, Rudolf Bultmann. And also I took Greek, so that I was able to enjoy my latter half of law school taking humanities courses basically. And therefore they gave me some sort of, they gave me a prize, I think some sort of, you know, publication of technical kind of business law type stuff, National Public Review or something. I don't even remember what it was. But in any case, it's an interesting story of how I got to Harvard Law School and how that worked out. And I suppose people that are clicking on this may be interested in knowing how to get into law school. And I will just share my own particular experience. I have been studying to be a priest in Mexico with the Dominican order, and I, did not continue in those studies, so that I came back to Florida, and all my friends were at Florida State University. So I needed like a fifth year of college to get a degree. And I enrolled at Florida State in spring of 77, did 3 quarters, graduated in December. I never attended any of my graduations, and I didn't attend Florida State anyway, which was not in December. It would have been probably in June or July. And one conversation with a person said to me, if you become a philosopher, or because I majored in philosophy, if you become an academic, you'll never own a house, you'll be poor. At the time, I had no one to advise me. My parents were dead. That's why I kind of derailed and left my priestly studies. And I figured I would just try to be like my friends, get into business or some practical uh, profession, and I knew I could probably get into law school. I was good at reading and thinking and speaking and all that kind of stuff. So I applied to several law schools. I got a full scholarship at University of Miami, I think with room and board and everything. I got accepted at some other schools, Duke, Georgetown, I think. I didn't get into Yale. I don't think I got into Columbia or University of I know I didn't get into Columbia or University of Michigan. I got into New York University, but I was on the waiting list at Harvard. And so, and my background was that my LSAT at the time. I know they have some, and I'm really old fashioned. I don't keep up with what's going on, but at the time there was an LSAT, and I think the highest score was 720 or maybe even higher. And I think I got a 687, which would have been on the lower end of acceptees, if you will. Of course, I was Hispanic. I assumed that played a role. But I had an interesting background. I had been in Mexico studying to be a Dominican, and I had studied, theology and all this stuff with a lot of European people. I don't know if I put that in my, letter in my application process, but in any case, I was on the waiting list. And so my father's inheritance for us, his children, finally came through, and I planned a trip to California, and my choice was to go to Duke Law School. And so I went to Durham, North Carolina, to look for housing, and I guess this was probably July, maybe August of 1978. And I found a nice apartment in a nice building, with medical students and people like that. But when I visited the law school, I went to this lobby where students were sitting, and we started talking. And I said, "Well, I'm on the waiting list at Harvard," and they go, "Well, why don't you try to get into there? This place is not that great." And I thought they had a pretty bad attitude towards their own school. So it just so happened that my best friend George was studying at Arthur D. Little in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a think tank type of school for very wealthy executive types from Saudi Arabia, India, all these countries abroad, oil people and all these kinds of things. He was not one of those, but he got into this school. And so I called him and I said, ask Harvard Law School if they are giving interviews to people on the waiting list. So he got back to me and said, yes, they do, will give you an interview. And so I canceled my California vacation, went to Boston. George picked me up. He lived on Massachusetts Avenue, which is, one of the great avenues that borders the Harvard campus. And so I slept over there that night. The next morning I got up. I could walk to the Pound building, which is one of the main, that's where the administration was and admissions. And I visited the campus a few years ago, and it's changed quite a bit. In my day, I guess you had Harkness Commons, which was the cafeteria and some other things like that. And I had a wild time. I mean, I graduated in 81, so I was a pretty wild Harvard Law School student. But now they have places like Casperson Student Center, which I'm not, I don't even, I've never heard of that. I mean, I've probably heard of it, but I don't know what that is really. But I mean, something like Austin Hall is very ancient. Hastings is famous. Griswold, after the Supreme Court justice. And I didn't live in the dorms. I lived on Harvard Street. So if you look at my my posts as to my addresses, I lived at 334 Harvard Street, number J3. I mean, I had enough money, from my inheritance to at least, be first class during law school. After that, I would probably be broke. But law school was about $4,000 tuition back then. So you can imagine. My teachers were Lawrence Tribe, Alan Dershowitz, Clark Bice, that supposedly is behind the Paper Chase movie. Um, it's people that may not be famous. Harold Berman was Law and Medieval Society. Charles Donahue was one of my favorites. Roman Law, Property, and he was one of my favorite professors. And some other famous names, I suppose. But in any case, what happened was that I walked over to Pound Hall, um, as I remember, and I said, I would like to have an interview. I'm on the waiting list. And they went in. This woman went in, came back out, and goes, "What did you say your name was?" And I said, "Emilio Chavez." And she said, "Do you know you've been accepted?" So that I was shocked, or at least very, and I mean, happily shocked. This is the letter. This letter had crisscrossed in the mail as I was traveling. So look at the date, July 18. It may have been traveling July 20. So yes, late in July was when I was doing this stuff. And they sent it to my, address in Bayshore Drive in Miami, real good location, had a studio there. And so I was thrilled. And so I go back to my friend's apartment as he's coming in his, racing bike. He's always been into racing bikes from Arthur D. Little. And he goes, "How did it go? How did it go?" And I said, "Oh, you know how those people are. They give you this run around. And they gave me this stupid letter," because they gave me a copy of the letter. And I show him the letter, and he goes, "You've been accepted." And I said, "Yeah, I got accepted." He goes, "I was invited to lunch by these guys over at Arthur D. Little, and I told them I can't because my best friend got into law school at Harvard." So he had that intuition, conviction, hope, whatever, and it turned out to be true. And we went to Joyce Chen Chinese place, I guess on Cambridge Pond or one of those ponds around there. But this is the campus of the law school, and the university itself is a beautiful campus. Of course, I lived just down the street from it on Harvard Street, and I would go to Broadway Market and buy Bath Oliver crackers, English crackers, and Mouton Cadet wine, red wine, and Yarsborough cheese. And Harvard Law School had a happy hour every Friday. Thank God it's TGIF. And I certainly went to those, and probably enjoyed myself more than I should have. But in any case, it was quite an experience. And, the campus is an experience. I later sort of exorcised myself from law by applying to the divinity school and going there for a year. Because my real love is in theology and biblical studies, and that's what most of my channel is about in English and Spanish. And so I lived in Divinity Hall, which is a kind of a different story here, but see if I don't know if I could find Divinity Hall. It wouldn't be that difficult, I don't think. It's off to the, if you look at a map, it's, up and to the right. Here you go, the Divinity School Library, Harvard Divinity School. I lived there. I lived on campus, and I lived in Divinity Hall. Now that was a trip and a half. Ralph Waldo Emerson lived there, back in the 19th century. And I really enjoyed the divinity school. I was in the wrong place for a Catholic, would-be theologian at the time, because my interest is really became really in biblical studies. Had I had that interest back then as strongly as I later developed it, I would have stayed at Harvard. They had the greatest Bible scholars around, Frank Moore Cross and others like that. As it was, I did take Helmut Kester's course on early Christianity. That was a trip. He was also a student of Rudolf Bultmann, very famous. Helmut Kester, if you know anything about New Testament studies. He had two chaired professorships at Harvard, I guess the Divinity School and the School of Arts and Sciences. But anyway, it goes to show that you can get into Harvard if you have what it takes. Today it's probably not too different from back then. The price is a lot different. As I said, I paid $4,000 a year tuition, and now I guess it's probably 50 or 60,000 just the tuition, and it's very different. But when I was there, I didn't fit in that well. I was just not looking forward to being a lawyer. I ended up being a lawyer for about 10 years before finally going off to Rome and getting my doctorate in theology, biblical theology. But the campus is fascinating. Of course, 40 years ago was quite different. I would go to this science center to study, and I would sometimes go, especially in the divinity school period, I would go to Harvard Yard with my friend Dan, who joined the Carthusians. And I've Googled him, and I hope and I think he stayed with the Carthusians, who don't really communicate with the outside world. But we would sit there in Harvard Yard and then go to the, I guess, the Hong Kong, whatever it was called, in Harvard Square. See if I can find Harvard Square. I mean, it's a magical place, okay? There were this is the Science Center. So this is a big map here. The Science Center. You could go there and study. Harvard Square was a trip, full of people, chess players, professional, I guess, chess players that would time the game moves and all that, and play for money. Of course, the Charles River was magical, and I would ride my bike. You can ride your bike from Cambridge to MIT. You can cross into Commonwealth Avenue. You see the whole Harvard. The river, the Charles River. You can go to the North End, all the way to the North End, the Italian. You can go to Boston Common. It was, I was in my 20s. It was really, really, really interesting. I got invited to eat with the undergraduates. Sometimes, you could actually stop undergraduates in Harvard Yard and ask for a smoke or something. And those were very friendly days in the 80s. I'm not trying to drop any pins here. I don't know what this is. But in any case, it was a lot of fun. And I'm sure it's changed quite a bit. There was the Harvard Square Theater, where I watched Women in Love and some other movies, and just a lot going on, 33 Dunster Street, I think that was in Cambridge, meals and all kinds of walking around, the Harvard Square area, the Coop. This thing is so smart that anything I click results in a big change. But in any case, I just wanted to share that the Jesuits I became friendly with eventually. They were on Brattle Street, among other places. Radcliffe, the Quadrangle, was a beautiful place. I think back then it was still divided, Radcliffe and Harvard. I think they gave the same degree, but I don't remember. In any case, I wanted to do a shorter video trying to see whether I have more viewers, to be very honest with you. At least I'm honest. And you have Hastings, I forget what that was, but now they have this regional law center. That was not around. The music center was around, so I would walk by the music building. And it is a tremendous university. I actually read Morrison's, I guess Samuel Morrison, uh, the history of the founding of Harvard, a big thick book, and it's incredibly interesting. These were all Cambridge graduates from England. That's why Cambridge, and Newntown was one of the names for Cambridge, and then the ferry into Boston, and all kinds of early American, 17th century stuff. So in any case, if you're applying to Harvard Law School, uh, I guess it's still ranked one of the highest, probably the number one ranking. Some of these guys have died. You still get Harvard Magazine or Harvard Law School Magazine once you went to the law school. This is my degree. I did not get cum laude or anything. Um, it is, an impressive degree. I'll tell you a funny story. The dean was Albert Sachs, and the very first afternoon of, initiation, I meet him, and he says to me, "Why do you want to go to Harvard Law School? Thanks for the welcome." And I said, "Oh, I guess you to have more options." He goes, "Options, options. Everybody wants options." But in any case, I had Arthur Miller for copyright. Who else did I have that was famous? I had Ginsburg for banking law. He was the one vetoed from the Supreme Court for having admitted to smoking pot. So that there's a lot of stories I could tell you about. Some of them maybe not for prime time, but in any case, 40 years ago, which is where your grandfathers went. If you're a young person Googling this and even got this far, which I seriously doubt, I at least wanted to share my experiences and hopefully kindle some excitement in this channel of mine. Thank you.